A war, a tribe swallowed by fire and steel, and a boy, the last echo of their song, standing alone among the ashes. He was no longer merely a blacksmith's son. He had become the very blade of destiny, tempered in grief and sharpened by vengeance. This is his tale, the tale of the child who rose from ruin to carve his people's name upon the memory of the earth.
The Guardian of Ashes. Written by Second Hogo.
Chapter 1. The Silent Earth. Night had long since lost its stars. The heavens, once proud with constellations, now carried only the pale scars of fire, as though the very sky had been seared during mankind's last frenzy of war. The world after the Third Great War was not a world at all, but a vast cemetery where the bones of cities rose like blackened monuments. Towers, once alive with light, stood gutted, their windows blind. Iron lay strewn in the dust like the ribs of fallen beasts. The rivers were choked with ash, the fields lay barren, and silence, immense, oppressive silence, was the first tyrant of this new age. Among this silence, life, stubborn and frail, clung to its roots. Humanity had retreated into tribes, each clutching the remnants of survival as though clutching fading embers. The inventions of yesterday, machines, engines, the thunderous brilliance of technology were no more. Now the spear had returned, the bow was king again. Men fought not with bullets, but with steel hammered in open flame, and the fate of nations was decided by the swing of a blade. One such tribe was called Ashra. They dwelt in the shadow of broken hills, in huts of timber and stone, and lived by hunting the wild goats that roamed the cliffs. To them, the ruins of the old world were like tombs of gods long dead, forgotten, accursed. Children were told not to wander near them, for ghosts of the past whispered there. In this tribe lived a youth named Arian. He was not yet scarred by battle, but already bore in his eyes a strange, unyielding fire. By trade he was a blacksmith, shaping plow and blade with a hammer inherited from his father. His arms, hardened by the anvil, carried strength beyond his years, and yet he dreamed not of conquest, but of peace. Peace in a world where peace had become a myth. Arian's family was his fortress. His father, a seasoned hunter, carried stories of courage etched into every scar upon his weathered skin. His mother, gentle yet steadfast, spoke little but prayed often, whispering to the night as though heaven might still listen. And there was laughter too, faint though it was, carried by the children of the village, who knew nothing yet of war. But peace is a fragile guest in the house of mankind. For in the darkness beyond the hills, another tribe stirred, the Karun, fierce as wolves, who thrived on blood and plunder. Their law was the sword, their faith was conquest. Where Ashra sought to live, Karun sought to rule. And the night was drawing near when their hunger would turn upon Ashra. It began with smoke on the horizon. Arian was at the forge when he smelled it, bitter, acrid, carried on the wind. Then came the cries, first scattered, then swelling into the chorus of chaos. The ground trembled under the charge of many feet. The Karun had come. Flames devoured the huts as arrows rained like blackened hail. The air filled with the clash of steel, the scream of the dying, the weeping of the helpless. Arian seized the sword he had forged only days before, a blade meant for practice, now baptized by necessity. His father rushed into the fray, shouting to him only once, "Stand, my son, the earth is watching." The night turned crimson. Arian fought as he had never fought, each swing born not of skill but of desperation. He saw children struck down, elders trampled beneath horses, mothers clutching infants in vain. He saw his father fall beneath the blade of a Karun war chief, his last breath swallowed by fire. He saw his mother, her face lit by the glow of burning thatch, vanish in the inferno. And then, amidst ruin and despair, Arian stood alone. The tribe of Ashra was no more, its huts reduced to ash, its songs silenced, its people slaughtered. Only the boy with the blacksmith's hammer and the untested sword remained, a solitary witness to the grave of his world. Beneath the falling night, he swore, not with words, but with the fire in his heart, that this was not the end, that the ashes of Ashra would one day speak again through him, that vengeance and destiny had chosen their heir. And thus began the tale of Arian, who was to be called the Guardian of Ashes.
Chapter 2. Grief and Oath. The dawn after slaughter is not dawn at all. It is a wound torn open upon the sky, pale and lifeless, spilling no light but only the cold memory of fire. Where once the village of Ashra stood, only cinders whispered, and smoke still clung to the blackened bones of huts. Ravens descended, bold and unafraid, for the living were too few to chase them away. Arian wandered among the ruins as one who dreams in nightmare. The earth was still warm with blood. His feet carried him to the place where his father had fallen. The body was gone, taken by fire or plunderers, but the broken spear lay there, mute witness to his end. He found no trace of his mother save for a strand of her cloth, scorched and fragile, fluttering like a dying flame upon the wind. He knelt there, and for the first time the fire within him broke into tears. A warrior's birth is not in the forge, nor in the clash of arms, but in the hour when grief becomes steel. By the ruins of his home, Arian spoke, not to men, not to gods, but to the silence itself. By this ash I swear, by this sword I swear. Karun shall drink their own blood, and the name of Ashra shall not be buried. His words were not heard, yet the silence accepted them. He rose, his hand tight upon the hilt of the sword he had forged. It was no longer a mere weapon of iron, it was an heirloom of vengeance, baptized in the smoke of his people. But vengeance alone cannot walk, it must find a road. And fate, as if summoned by his oath, placed one before him. From the hills emerged a band of survivors, few in number, their faces hollowed by horror. Among them was a woman who carried herself not as the broken do, but as the unyielding. She bore no tears, only a scar that ran down her cheek like a river of memory. She was Saya, once of the Ashra, but hardened by loss long before this night. In her hand was a bow, strung with sinew, and her eyes, though weary, glimmered like steel beneath frost. It was Saya who first spoke to Arian. The Karun will not stop. They will come again,
to others, to all. If you seek death, stay here among the ashes. If you seek vengeance, follow me." And Arian, with the ashes still warm upon his skin, followed. That night they camped beyond the hills, beneath the ruins of a broken aqueduct that once carried water to a city now dust. There, by the faint light of fire, another figure approached. An elder draped in rags, with eyes sharp as the winter sky. His beard was silver, but his gaze spoke of centuries. He named himself Darin, though others had once called him many things: scholar, wanderer, heretic.
He looked upon the two youths, their weapons gleaming faintly, their souls raw with loss, and he smiled, not with joy, but with the grim certainty of one who sees the path of destiny. "The Karun are but wolves," Darun said, "fierce but blind. There is a greater fire yet slumbering, deeper than their greed. I have seen it. In the ruins of the old world, beyond the deserts and the black mountains, lies the heart of iron. It beats still, though mankind has forgotten it. To touch it is to claim the power of the ancients, to rebuild or to ruin utterly." Saya frowned, her hand upon her bow. "Old tales to frighten children." But Arian listened. The words fell upon him like sparks upon dry wood. He remembered the vow he had sworn, the vision of his father's final stand, the silence that had consumed his mother's last prayer. "Then we will find this heart," Arian said. "If it can bring strength, it shall be ours. If it can bring ruin, then I will destroy it with my own hand. But by it, the Karun will fall." Darun studied him, and in the youth's fire he saw not folly, but the first blaze of legend. Thus from the ashes of Ashra, 3 shadows set forth into the wilderness. Arian, whose grief had become a sword. Saya, whose scar had become her shield. And Darun, whose memory of the old world carried secrets like hidden daggers. The world before them was vast, broken, and merciless. Yet upon their steps leaned the weight of history itself. For vengeance is a seed, and when watered by blood, it does not grow quietly. It rises like a storm.
Chapter 3: The Road into Darkness. The Wilderness is a book written in silence, its pages torn by wind and clawed by time. Arian, Saya, and Daran walked upon those pages as shadows do upon forgotten walls, each step carrying them deeper into the wounds of the earth left by war. They passed the blackened hills, where nothing grew, only stones split by fire and rivers that bled mud instead of water. In the distance, the skeleton of a city loomed, its towers bent like old men, its bridges severed like broken spines. Crows circled endlessly above it, as if waiting for the last heartbeat of mankind. The nights were cruel. The wind howled through ruins as though ghosts still quarreled there. Around their fire, Daran would speak in whispers of what had been. Vast roads of iron where carriages moved without horses, cities lit brighter than the stars, machines that soared in the heavens. Saya scoffed at such stories, but in her eyes was a flicker of doubt, as though some fragment of memory stirred within her blood. Arian listened in silence. Each word was a mirror held before his vow. If such power once existed, what ruin might it bring if seized again? And yet, What salvation might it offer if tamed? His heart was torn between vengeance and destiny. On the seventh night, beneath a sky without moon, the wilderness answered them with teeth. From the thickets rose figures not wholly men, creatures twisted by the wars of old, their limbs bent, their eyes glowing faint as coals. They were the Ashborn, children of radiation and hunger, who hunted like beasts but bore the cruel cunning of men. The battle was merciless. Sea's arrows sang in the dark, striking eyes and throats with unerring fury. Arian met them with the hammer of his arm and the fire of his blade. Every stroke split bone, every cry of his foes was an echo of Ashra's ashes. Yet for every one that fell, two more leapt forward. It was Daran who saved them, not with steel, but with knowledge. He scattered a powder of his own making into the fire, and it roared into a sudden blaze, casting a circle of light so fierce the Ashborn shrieked and fled into the night. When silence returned, only their blood remained, black and steaming upon the stones. The days bled into weeks. Their path climbed mountains whose peaks tore the clouds like spears. Snow fell in silence, covering their tracks, yet hunger followed them like a patient hound. In that desolation, Arian began to change. His shoulders bent no longer with grief, but carried the weight of command. He no longer looked to Darun for direction, nor waited for Sion's counsel. He chose the path, and the others followed. One night, as the fire crackled low, Sion watched him with eyes sharpened by both respect and unease. "You were a boy when the ashes fell, but the fire has burned you into something else. Beware, Arian. Vengeance is a torch. It lights the road, but it can also blind." Arian met her gaze, and his words were hard as steel. Better blinded by fire than swallowed by the dark. Darun, who had listened in silence, spoke at last. "The heart of iron lies beyond the deserts and the black mountains. Many have sought it, all have perished. If we reach it, you will face not only the Karun, but the truth of your own oath. For power is a mirror, Arian, and in it a man may find not his destiny, but his ruin." The fire died down, leaving only embers, and in the silence each of them dreamed their own dream. Sion, of a world where no tribe need bow to another. Darun, of knowledge preserved before it faded into dust. Arian, of a sword descending upon the Karun, sharp as judgment itself. The road stretched before them, endless and merciless. Behind lay ashes, ahead lay shadows, but the vow within Arian's heart marched beside them, beating louder than hunger, fiercer than fear. And thus the wilderness, vast and cruel, began to carve them, not into wanderers, but into warriors of destiny. Chapter 4. The Battle of Ruins. The desert broke at last into stone. Beyond weeks of wandering hunger, the horizon lifted, and there stood the City of Silence, the forbidden place that Darun had spoken of. Its towers, half devoured by centuries, loomed like the teeth of giants gnawing at the sky. Windows gaped like hollow eyes, streets yawned like graves. No bird flew there, no wind dared sing. It was Sea who first stepped forward, her bow strong, though no enemy was yet seen. Arian followed, sword at his side, his heart thunderous in his chest. Within these ruins lay the promise of vengeance, or the snare of ruin. They crossed bridges cracked by time, walked avenues where weeds grew through the bones of stone, Statues of kings lay shattered, their crowns buried in dust, and in the heart of that dead empire they found it. A chamber vast as a cathedral, where light bled through broken glass. At its center stood the heart of iron, a machine vast and coiled, its surface scarred, yet still pulsing faint with hidden power. Cables twisted like veins, metal ribs rose like altars. It was no relic, it was a beast asleep, dreaming of fire. Darun's eyes shone with both awe and terror. "There it lies," he whispered, "the promise of the ancients. To wake it is to command thunder itself." But before Arian could speak, the silence shattered. From the shadows of broken arches came the thunder of hooves, the howl of horns. The Karun had arrived. They poured into the chamber like a black tide, warriors clad in bone and iron, their banners torn from the hides of beasts, their leader towering above them astride a warhorse armored in steel. His name was Vayrad, the warlord of Karun, whose hands had broken kings, whose blade had ended tribes. It was he who had struck down Arian's father. The clash was instant. Say's arrows sang death into the first ranks. Arian met steel with steel, his blade a storm of fury, each strike echoing the oath of Ashra. The chamber became a furnace of screams and firelight. Darun, too old for battle, fought with wisdom. He struck torches into the oil that pooled about the ruins, casting pillars of flame to scatter the foe. Yet the Karun were many, and their war cry shook the bones of the city.
Amid the chaos, Vayrad dismounted, his shadow vast against the heart of iron. His voice thundered above the din. "Boy of Ashra, I remember your father. He begged for mercy when my blade found him. Shall I carve the same tears from your eyes?" Arian's blood roared. With a cry that shook even the ruins, he met the warlord in combat. Steel rang like bells of judgment. Vayrad's blade was broad as an axe, each swing meant to crush, not cut. Arian, swift as fire, turned aside the storm, his sword flashing like lightning. They clashed among the bones of the past, sparks leaping like stars. Saya fell wounded at the foot of the heart, an arrow buried in her side. Darun, in his final act, hurled fire upon a collapsing pillar, burying scores of Karun beneath stone, but the effort cost him his life. He fell, a scholar, dying as a warrior, his last breath carried by smoke. The duel raged. Arian's arms bled, his lungs burned, but his bow burned fiercer still. With a final surge, he feigned weakness, drawing Vayrad's wrath. The warlord lifted his blade for the killing stroke, only to meet the upward arc of Arian's sword. Steel pierced flesh. Vayrad staggered, his cry echoing through the dead city before he fell upon the stones, his crown of bone shattering beside him. Silence returned, heavy as a tomb. The Karun, leaderless, fled into the night. And there, amid ruin and fire, Arian stood, his sword red with vengeance, the heart of iron pulsing before him like the last temptation of gods.
Chapter 5. The Guardian of Ashes. The battle was ended, but the silence that followed was heavier than the clash of steel. The chamber and the heart trembled with its own breath, as though the machine had heard the cries of war and hungered to wake. Its veins pulsed faintly, casting a cooled light upon the ruins, upon the corpses, upon the sword that dripped with vengeance. Arian stood before it, his chest heaving, blood streaking his arms. At his feet lay Vayrad, the warlord who had slain his father, now nothing more than broken flesh and shattered pride. Around him lay the fallen of Karun and Ashra alike, mingled in death as though the earth itself refused to tell friend from foe. Saya, pale but alive, leaned against the iron ribs of the machine. Her wound bled freely, yet her eyes, dark, unyielding, were fixed on Arian. She said, "You have your victory. Now choose what kind of world it shall be." Darn's body lay not far, half buried in the rubble of his own making. His face was still, but in his open hand remained a scroll, ancient and fragile, its script describing the secret of the heart. He had carried it across deserts and mountains, only to die at its door. His silence now was a question. Arian lifted his gaze to the heart of iron. In its silent coils he saw visions, cities reborn, towers rising again to pierce the heavens, lights blooming brighter than stars, armies armed not with swords, but with fire that could devour nations. And then once more, ashes, always ashes. The vow of his father returned to him. The earth is watching. The vow of his own heart burned within him. The name of Ashra shall not be buried. And so he lifted his sword. The steel rang as it struck the ancient core. Sparks erupted like a storm of stars. The heart screamed a cry of metal in memory before collapsing upon itself in a flood of light and ruin. When the smoke cleared, the heart of iron was no more. Arian, bruised but unbroken, dragged Saya from the ruins. Above them, dawn was breaking. Not the pale dawn of ashes, but a dawn unchained, free of the temptations of forgotten fire. The Karun, scattered and leaderless, faded into the wilds. The tribes who heard of Veyrod's fall, of the death of the heart, gathered in time beneath a new banner, not of conquest, but of survival. They did not call Arian a king. He would have refused such a crown. But they named him Guardian of Ashes, the man who had slain the past to save the future. Years would pass, and songs would be sung. Children by the fire would hear how the boy of Ashra forged his own sword, lost all he loved, and yet stood against warlords and the ghosts of the old world. They would learn that power once broken need not be reclaimed, that sometimes the truest strength is not in building empires, but in denying them. And in the memory of the earth, written not in stone nor in iron, but in the hearts of those who lived on, the name of Ashra endured. For the ashes had given birth to a guardian, and his silence spoke louder than the roar of machines.
I used to have